everybody? Welcome back to another video. This time, anamorphic, hopefully less controversial than our last anamorphic video, but today we are talking about the Laowa Proteus 2X anamorphic lenses. Now, these lenses are fairly fun. Laowa sent us a couple. Sadly, not a whole set, so we couldn't go out and shoot kind of like a whole project. But that being said, they did want our feedback and an honest review, so we said we would do that and put them up against some other lenses. So, what are the Proteus? They are a 2X Super 35 coverage lens, and they are beefy babies. These things are fairly heavy compared to what else is in the market, but they're robust and they're not insanely heavy, but they're a little bit thicker now that the trend has gone smaller. These have remained their size due to the performance that you'll see coming up. So, price point on these guys roughly is about $9,500 for each set of two. They sell them in pairs or as singles, but they don't have a discount for all four. So you have to buy two sets of two. Comes in roughly around 18,000 bucks. All in all, fun little set of 2X anamorphics, and we have found so far that they do cover a little bit more than Super 35. That's why we are shooting this stuff on the Raptor in 7K 6x5 mode to get our nice little aspect ratio here. Now, let's talk about some mechanics. These lenses, the iris and the focus, feels incredibly solid and not a whole lot of tension, moves freely. I would say really these remind me of the Cooke Anamorphics as well as even the Airy Master Anamorphics. Just very smooth, easy to move mechanics that don't have a whole lot of resistance and nice and even all the way through. Good amount of travel on the focus, which is really great. And just all in all, feel very robust. Now these lenses are pretty awesome in the fact that they have a really unique Backfocus Adjustment, this FA here versus the traditional way, which would be shimming the mount, makes things a little bit more efficient, and honestly, it's something you could do in the field if you had to, so very cool for Laowa to add that. That's, in my opinion, a pretty high-end feature to have in a lens at this price. Okay, in our testing, we did this a couple different ways. Things we wanted to look for, overall performance, but just wanted to see them out on the street, in the studio. So Galen went around and shot some footage outside with Amelia, as well as did some fun stuff in the studio. And then we took the Proteus and we're going to put them up against the Orions and the Master Anamorphics. Now to note, we didn't have matching 50s or any matching focal lengths, so we did the 45 on the Proteus and the 50s on the Master Anamorphics and the Orions. Now we wanted to test these against each other to test some of the basic metrics of lenses. Breathing, color, flares, sharpness across the frame, and just coverage in general. So with that, we're gonna get into some testing and kind of narrate some stuff and present some of our findings as we're watching the footage. So let's get into it. Okay, so with the Proteus set, we had the 45 and the 85, so let's see what Galen shot out on the street. Okay, now we're back in the studio. We're just gonna run you through the 45 and the 85, kind of long form, just to get an overall look of feel for close focus. It is worth noting the 45 is the neutral flare, which takes the color of the light source as the flare, and the 85 is an amber. So keep that in mind when watching these tests. let's get into the test with these 3 lenses. We're just gonna play some stuff back to back and move through this one pretty quick. All right, in these tests, we also shot wide open at T2, as well as a 2.8/4 split, just so we can get a good feel of how things start to sharpen up as we stop down. All right, let's get into breathing first. You can see in the background, we've got some C-stands. We tried to put those on the edge of frame and just pull close to infinity and go back and forth a few times. It's really interesting. Obviously, looking at the master Anamorphics, there's almost no breathing. Is it insane situation that these lenses have? But maybe to be expected because they're about $40,000 a piece. So moving on to the Proteus. Very, very surprised here at how these compare with the master Anamorphics. Honestly, I was expecting a lot worse given their price point. But damn, they're really close to how well the Masters perform in this specific area. Okay, moving on to the Orions. The Orions don't exhibit the same amount of breathing, but they do kind of look a little more interesting and perform what I would say like a more vintage or what you would think of as an anamorphic lens, which is honestly pretty cool. It is worth noting on the Atlas that from 10 feet to infinity, there's very minimal breathing, but once you start moving into the 10 feet to close focus range, that's when the breathing really starts to become noticeable. Not a bad thing, just interesting compared to the other 2. Okay, for sharpness, we're gonna start off with the master Anamorphics because that is the standard for a sharp anamorphic. Now, pretty easy to see at both T-stops that we shot these at that the master Anamorphics retain sharpness pretty much across the board, and we're shooting them past their intended format. So we're shooting 7K 6x5 pretty much at the edge of their image circle, and they're still performing very well. I actually like to shoot them like this because I like them to dirty up a little bit towards the edge of frame, but still, even at T2, they hang tight pretty well. On the Proteus, these also have a really great amount of sharpness, even wide open. Even though it's a little softer, maybe a little bloomier than the master Anamorphics, they still hold up really well, and again, we're pushing them past their intended image circle to kind of dirty up the edges, give them a little funk if we can, but even still, they perform really well out at 7K 6x5. The Orion always looks great. No surprise, we love these lenses. They have a little bit more softness as you move off the crosshairs, but not a ton. And it's also very pleasing. Keeps your eyes center frame or where you want it, but still your thirds, top, bottom, left, right, are all very usable. And even the edge of frame, I would still say is acceptable, even though we're also shooting these past a Super 35 format as well. Okay, we just wanted to test what the coatings and the colors look like, so we're just gonna put these all up on the screen at the same time, showing Galen's face 3 times. Lucky you. Anyway, easy to see, little variance in color, always to be expected, but all of them look great, so no problems there. No surprise, these are modern anamorphics, and they're gonna vary a little bit in how much they flare. With the Masters, almost none. You don't get those traditional looking flares, even with the flare sets, still doesn't feel like a traditional anamorphic flare. Moving on to the Proteus, you do get some of that flare. It's very flare resistant with their coating. When you want them to flare, they do. They have some interesting verticals and some other stuff. Definitely more interesting than the Masters if you're looking for flare, but a good middle ground because moving over to the Orions, these have maybe my favorite flares of the set. That's a personal thing. And they exhibit more of that traditional anamorphic blue flare with some, streaks and rainbows and a lot of layers going on. It's not overbearing with their coatings, but it just has a little bit more character in that department if you want to take it to that extreme in your frame. All in all 3 lenses perform a little bit different, but the Proteus is kind of a mix of the two. If you took the Masters and the Orions in general, boom. I think that kind of becomes what the Proteus is, which is kind of a fun observation. All right, again, we're gonna bless you with Galen's face 3 times over. This is just gonna be close focus on all 3 lenses, just showing you what the background fall off looks like, as well as how close you can frame somebody. Again, we are shooting wider than Super 35, which is what all these are rated for. So if you are shooting Super 35 2X, this frame might look a little bit closer, but since we're shooting 7K 6x5, we're out a little bit more than what you might normally expect. Okay, let's talk about distortion. Not gonna be a whole lot of distortion on any of these lenses. I would say the master Anamorphics are going to be very neutral, whereas the Proteus are going to exhibit a small amount of pincushion. You probably see that on the edges of frame. We're gonna show a couple clips real quick, just of that corrected in post using a very simple slider and resolve to show you how easy it is to correct the pincushion on the Proteus, but overall, it's not nearly as much of an issue as I thought it might have been going into this test. And moving on to the Orions, I would say the Orions exhibit the same amount of barrel as the Proteus do pincushion, which is very minimal, but it is there, especially if you're going past your Super 35 format. The barrel becomes a little bit more noticeable on the Orion. One last comparison I want to make with the Proteus is to a set of lenses that have been out for a very long time that are very popular, and that is the Cooke Anamorphics, 2X specifically. Now the Cookes have what I would call a substantial amount of pincushion distortion, much more in my opinion than the Proteus. Now the Cookes have been used on countless projects over the years and still continue to rent out very well. So if you're looking for, say, a Cooke anamorphic on a budget, I really feel like these Proteus are the one lenses that are the most directly relatable to the Cookes. They are about the same size. They perform very similarly, though these I feel like are sharper across the focal lengths we tested and are more consistent than the Cookes. These though, with the added benefit, have a little bit more character when it comes to the flare compared to the Cookes, unless you get the special flare versions, which even still, I feel like the Proteus have a more pronounced and interesting flare than the Cookes in general. So if you're used to shooting on the Cookes and you want to try something a little bit less expensive, I really think these Proteus are a great way to kind of get that same look without going too crazy. All right, that is the Laowa Proteus 2X. Honestly, really impressed with these. I didn't know what to expect when I got them, but after playing with them for a few days and shooting some stuff and really getting into the footage, I really think it's a great option for a more low budget anamorphic that looks great, performs great, has a modern look if you're into the modern anamorphic look, that gives you some options in post. And honestly, Laowa's been great with support, so if you ever ran into issues, I feel like they'd be really quick to give you support on anything you're doing. So with that, that is our video on the Proteus Anamorphics. Thanks for watching. Remember, like, subscribe. We need more people watching. It's kind of getting hard to do all these very long form videos as in depth as we're doing them, but hopefully one day it'll be worth it to keep this going. And remember, if you're ever in Seattle or the Pacific Northwest, look us up. We'd love to help you out with rentals for camera, lighting, lenses, whatever you need. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.